Where we're seeing the demand is areas where new infrastructure has been put in by the government, essentially.
If you're going to be speaking to someone every single day, it's the builder.
Energy efficiency comes up as a really important point for many people that are looking for a home.
In a country where auction culture has long ruled in the big cities, with existing homes going under the hammer almost every single weekend, today, in partnership with Stroud Homes, we're asking the question, are buyers still choosing existing homes? Or is the shift towards buying and building new gaining even more momentum in 2026 as buyers look to secure an affordable home in an exceptionally tight market? Here with me to unpack shifting buyer behaviour is Angus Moore, Executive Manager of Economics at REA Group, and James Stroud, founder of Stroud Homes. Angus, I want to kick things off with you. Auction culture has really been a part of the property DNA for decades, and especially in Melbourne and Sydney. But with demand so high and competition exceptionally hot, and homes actually often selling for thousands more than the reserve price, do you think auctions are as strong as in the years past?
Alice, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Certainly auctions are a big part of Sydney and Melbourne. We see something in the order of half of homes are sold at auction. That varies a lot depending on the time of year, what market conditions are doing. But, as a rule of thumb, that's sort of where we'd start. It's a bit less common in other parts of the country. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, they don't see as many homes get auctioned. There's a lot more sales by private treaty, though it has been increasing in some of those markets. In terms of what we're seeing in market conditions, and to your point about things selling a lot more expensive than perhaps they're listed for, or their reserve, that's very true in places like Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth at the moment, where prices have been growing very quickly. Market conditions are red hot. All of those are seeing at least half, and far more than half in somewhere like Perth. It's like 3/4 of homes selling above what they're listed for. For Sydney and Melbourne, conditions aren't quite as hot. We haven't been seeing as strong price growth in those markets. And that's been true for a while, remains true here in early 2026. At the moment, as a rough rule of thumb, something like a third of homes that are selling in Sydney and Melbourne, whether that's selling by auction or by private trading, are selling, at or within their sort of target listed pricing band. And another third, give or take, are selling above that band. Again, that share obviously varies a lot with market conditions. That's where it's at the moment. But, when conditions are hot, we see a lot more homes selling above that asking price.
Well, in terms of market conditions, another changing dynamic is that the buying journey is now taking on average 40 weeks. Now, this shifts year on year. I think that's gone down from about 44 weeks last year, but it's an exceptionally long time to be looking for a home. But I would love to know, Angus, what is driving all of this?
I think it's really kind of two sets of conditions, consistent with what I was talking before about, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth being just really red hot. Part of the reason for that is there's just not a lot of homes for sale in those markets, in the established market, at least in those cities. We didn't see a lot of new stock hitting market, particularly in Brisbane last year. And that means choice for buyers is very limited, and therefore competition from buyers for any given home is very, very strong. Sydney, Melbourne, that's not quite as true. Last year was actually pretty healthy in terms of the number of new homes coming into the market in those cities. And so stock on market, choice for buyers, still relatively good, which is part of why we're seeing, not as hot conditions in Sydney and Melbourne at the moment, and why prices aren't growing as quickly either.
Okay, well, in terms of new homes, so we're talking either off the plan or perhaps a knockdown rebuild. James, talk to me about what Stroud Homes is seeing in terms of the demand for new homes. Has there been an increase over the last couple of years?
Alice, there's been a huge increase in the demand for new homes in the last few years. Since COVID has finished, our sales at Stroud Homes increased by 78% over the last calendar year.
Wow.
And we're seeing our display homes are busy every weekend.
So why is this?
I think that new homes are a good deal, Alice. I think that they're a great deal for people. And I think one of the reasons is it's kind of like essentially a payment plan. You buy your land and then a little bit later the build starts and you pay for your build on kind of your progressive payment plan.
And that payment plan is based off a locked-in price, right?
It's a locked-in price, and then as the home gets built, as it reaches each stage, you pay for a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the sweat equity that most people put in, your lawn and your turf and things like that.
And sweat equity is things that you do yourself, right?
That's what it means.
Okay, yeah. So it sounds affordable. Really, that's kind of the crux of a new build, is it's a lot more affordable. You know what you're getting, you've locked in your price, you can plan for things.
Yes, yeah.
So Angus, how are the conditions in the new build market and what are we seeing in terms of buyer interest on realestate.com.au?
It's really kind of two markets again, a bit like we were talking about with auctions. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, the new homes market is pretty tight, pretty competitive. We're seeing a lot of demand from buyers. One way we like to track this, it's not the only way, but it's a nice way of looking at it, is the number of inquiries that we're getting on listings for new homes on realestate.com.au. It's not a perfect measure, but it's a nice way of thinking about how many buyers are looking and how competitive any given home is. In those smaller capitals, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth, we're seeing pretty solid demand. It's not as strong as we were seeing in 2020, 2021, interest rates at record lows, housing affordability pretty good, lots of government incentives for new builds as well. And, it was a really red hot market at that point, but at the moment, still really quite strong in those cities. Sydney and Melbourne, not as much so. Demand there has been a bit softer for a few years, really since the RBA started raising rates. Though in the past sort of 12 to 18 months, we have seen a bit of a pickup, probably a bit more so in Sydney than in Melbourne, but even so in Melbourne, we're starting to see an improvement in demand there.
James, I understand that Stroud Homes builds, down the east coast of Queensland and into regional areas. Whereabouts are you seeing the boom and the demand for new homes, and why do you think it is these areas?
So, Alice, where we're seeing the demand is areas where new infrastructure has been put in by the government, essentially, all around Australia. And we had some training once. Bernard Salt, the famous Australian demographer, came and told us that if you want to run a successful building company, go to the end of the latest piece of freeway that the government's built and set up your building company there. And I think that's a great thing for buyers to think about as well, because that gives them access to both the airports and the jobs and the business, and also at the other end of the freeway, the serenity and the lifestyle that they really want. Buyers have to choose between a greenfield area or a knockdown and rebuild area. And they have their own benefits. Greenfield is a new area. Knockdown and rebuild, you're moving into a street with big trees and established neighbors. Totally different experience.
That accessibility piece, I think, is the key part there, because you do want, as you say, like that beautiful, idyllic kind of coastal dream that everybody has. But you do really still need that accessibility if your kids go to school, wherever you work. It's the transport piece. But Angus, is all of this stacking up with what our research shows in terms of, I guess, where and what people are looking for?
Yeah, I think James is pointing to two kind of important trends that we've seen playing out in housing markets over the last 6 years, give or take. So the first trend, it's actually an older one, people wanting bigger homes, but we really saw that kick up during the pandemic from sort of early 2020. People being locked down, working from home more, the value of having an extra bedroom increased a lot. And we saw that in what people are looking for and where they're looking. And then the second trend is a little bit more recent, which is housing affordability. Obviously with the RBA raising rates very quickly to combat inflation in 2022 and 2023, it's pushed housing affordability around the country to some of the worst levels we've ever seen. And so that means people are looking in more affordable areas and they're looking for larger homes. And so that favors the sorts of outlying areas around our cities that are still accessible to the cities if you need to, but offer bigger, more affordable homes. So, if you're in Sydney, think the Central Coast or Wollongong. If you're in Melbourne, think Geelong. If you're in Brisbane, think places like the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, or north up towards Noosa. In terms of what, once people have picked an area and found that more affordable location, in terms of what people are looking for, we run a survey of property seekers, which kind of highlights the sorts of things that matter. Perhaps unsurprisingly, bedrooms comes in as the number one thing that people are looking for. But some of the other really important factors are things like having a garage. More than 50% of people want one. That's an important thing. Number of bathrooms, again, about 50% of people. Things like natural light, solar energy, having a view, those are all important features as well.
So if building and buying new is not only proving to be a really affordable option, but it can be a great way to eliminate some of that really hot competition that we've spoken about around the country. James, if building new is a path that some of our listeners are considering, what are the steps to doing so? Because when it takes 18 months to 2 years from kind of concept to completion, I imagine there's a few steps that goes into it.
Absolutely, Alice. So the steps are really simple, actually. So the first thing, select your land, get your finance sorted so you know how much money you have to spend, and then find a builder and select a design that builder has.
What's your biggest tip here? Is there any one step that might need more attention than others? Because something that speaks to me is it's the builder. If you're going to be speaking to someone every single day, like for me, I'd want a good relationship with that person.
Absolutely. The relationship with your builder is super important. A lot of Australians' wealth journey includes building some great homes and great buildings. So a relationship with your builder is huge. Find someone you can communicate really good with. And then once you get that sorted, my big tip here is plan hard and build easy. Plan hard and build easy. So do all the planning, select the colors, get the design sorted out, be very comfortable with what you're going to build. And then when it comes out, it becomes very easy to have that home built.
It's like that saying of measure twice, cut once.
Exactly. Measure twice, cut once, plan hard, build easy.
Is there any watch outs in this space that people need to be aware of?
I would say the number one watch out is to don't put price first, put relationship first. Find a builder that you can communicate with really well, that you can gel with, and you will find that makes for a great build, a great quality home, and something you're going to be really happy with for maybe 10 years.
Well, something that we've seen huge developments in when it comes to new builds is a sustainable design, sustainability space. Angus, what sort of government incentives are there in this space? Because it's a really big focus, not just for us as a business, but I'm seeing this talked about right across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an issue that I think a lot of people really focus on. We run a survey of property seekers, and energy efficiency comes up as a really important point for many people that are looking for a home. And it's one that people believe should be kind of shared across the board. It's not just up to the government, it's not just up to builders, it's not just up to home buyers, it's kind of everyone's responsibility to deliver those more efficient homes. When we think about the sorts of things that people are looking for, 3/4 of potential home buyers say that thermal efficiency, so, does their home stay warm in winter and stay cool in summer, is really important. Solar energy, having solar panels, is one of the top features that home buyers look for. It actually ranks above having an ensuite or an outdoor entertaining area.
Oh, wow.
So it is an important feature that a lot of people are looking for. So, that's from home buyers. From the government, obviously, given how important it is to people, it's unsurprising that there's a lot of programs in place from the government to support this. There's way too many for me to go through here. We'd be here for hours. But some of the ones that people might be really familiar with are things like the Small Scale Renewable Energy Scheme. That provides a rebate for installing solar energy or solar panels on your roof or similar. But there are all sorts of programs. Many of them are state specific as well. So, it's worth looking into what's available where you're looking to build.
James, talk to me about how the building industry is stepping up in this space.
Well, we've brought in so many things over the last few years to bring it up to these very high energy rating in all the states. And it's genuinely making homes so much more comfortable. There's incredible windows you can buy now. The solar and the battery systems are quite amazing. And, it's more expensive up front. That's just going to be a gift that keeps on giving for a very long time. I just think it's going to make people more comfortable and make the home more affordable.
Something that I'm seeing developers do is really start to consider the orientation of the home, and I'm noticing them doing it more than probably in years past. Talk me through why the orientation of your home plays a key part in the sustainability of it.
Orientation is such a huge thing, Alice, and we've put a big push in at Stroud Homes to train our salespeople to make sure that we get this right every single time. So it's so nice to have a home where you can open the windows on the side of the house that the prevailing breezes come from. And there's another window on the other side of the house that lets them back out again. One of the best compliments I ever have is when someone walks into one of our homes and says, "This home feels cool, and you guys don't even have the air conditioning on today. That means we really got it right."
On that orientation tangent, do you think that this offers buyers flexibility when it comes to future-proofing their houses? Because if you're utilizing that natural sunlight and you're bringing down your bills, that to me is huge when future-proofing.
A comfortable home never goes out of style, so that's future-proofing. And one of my
it adds to the affordability of it, right?
It makes it cheaper to run forever. It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
If you can build a home that that uses less energy, it's a gift that keeps on giving. And one of the favorite gifts is when your friends come to visit and go, "Your house is cooler than ours and you don't have your air conditioning turned on." Well, that's because you built a really good, sustainable home.
So, Angus, I do have one last crystal ball question for you, which I know you love those. But looking 5 to 10 years down the track, do you think we could actually see majority of buyers leaning towards building new rather than existing if all these trends that we've spoken about are just likely to continue?
It's an interesting question. Certainly new housing is going to continue to be a really important part of Australia's housing market. And that's sort of obvious if you just step back and look at the fundamentals. We are still a very fast growing country by global standards. And we need more homes for that population. They have to come from somewhere, and that means we need to build a lot more new homes. Unfortunately, for the past 5-ish years, give or take, we probably haven't been building enough. There's been a lot of reasons for that. Construction costs skyrocketed during the pandemic. It's been very hard to find skilled labor for a while. Related to those two trends, it's also been taking longer to build homes. The good news, though, is that those factors are starting to abate. We're not out of the woods yet. It is still, some of that's still quite challenging. But it is starting to get better, and we are actually starting to build more homes than we were a few years ago. So on that basis, the outlook for residential construction is a bit better than perhaps it has been. I think the other really pleasing development for me is that we're actually talking about it a lot more than we used to. Building homes has probably been a neglected part of the public policy debate for 2 decades, maybe longer. And I think that's starting to change. We're seeing that focus from the National Cabinet to build 1.2 million homes over 5 years. We're seeing things in places like New South Wales, Victoria around transit-oriented development, all designed to make delivering new housing a bit easier, a bit more affordable. So we're focusing in the right area. There's still ways to go, but I think, new homes will continue to be a really important part of both our housing market and public policy.
I think you bang on in that. Although we might be falling short of targets, something that's really great is we actually have a target. And
exactly.
It's super under the spotlight now. But my very last question is for you, James. What are your predictions for buying and building new moving into the future?
Well, I think Australians love and are getting to love even more a really well-built home. I think they're going to spend more time slowing down and thinking a lot harder about what they're building and who they're building it with. And I think it's not just price, long-term comfort, running costs, quality, choosing a really good builder that they can work with. I think these are trends we're going to see in the future.
Today's conversation has been really interesting. I think whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, the way in which we buy and build homes in Australia really is an evolving space. Auctions, I think, will certainly continue to hold their place in property culture, but what new builds are offering is choice, flexibility, and sustainability that sometimes an existing home can't match. Thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. I've really appreciated it, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alice.
Yes, thanks for having me as well, Alice.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general information and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.